Okay. Okay.
Do you want me to stay here?
No.
No.
No, it's okay. 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 Sorry. Sorry everyone for the technical difficulties, but we will start the presentation now. Okay. So first, I hope everyone can hear me because I don't know how good my computer is, but first we'll start the presentation, and I don't I don't know if I'll be able to answer questions during the presentation, but I'll try to carve out at least 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions. And if I don't get to your question, feel free to email me with the questions that you have, and I'll try to get back to you. So this will be on forensics. So, as you may or may not know, forensics is a lab event, meaning that it is half lab and half written events. So usually what happens is one person does the lab part and one person does the written part, and that's how, but you can choose how to split it up. However, unlike other lab events such as chem lab, in this part, the two parts are very involved, which means that if the lab person does not finish all of the work, then it will be very hard for the written person to finish their part as well. And so far, there are some changes in rules that I'll talk about in the next slide. And as you can see, forensics has many different aspects, which makes it hard to study for, but I'll try to help you as much as I can. Okay. So for parameters, this year they changed it so that instead of a binder of notes, you can only have 5 pages, which really sucks, but it's what we get. So you have to learn how to condense all your notes and memorize stuff as much as you can. And you'll have to bring supplies to the actual competition. This is not needed for screening because for screening, you won't have to do an actual lab, but the supplies will be provided by the school, and you might have to provide some stuff, but they're common household items. And other things like safety, you're working with chemicals, so there's a lot of safety restrictions, so don't go around splashing chemicals everywhere. And this also emphasizes lab skills, and cleanup is really important, especially in the real competition. And you should have at least basic knowledge on all parts because you don't know what they're going to ask you to do. So even though it's a lot of stuff that you need to know, you should know generally everything. Okay. So content. So as you can see in this list, there is a lot of stuff. So I'll go through them one by one and explain a little bit of what they are and how to approach them a little bit. Okay, so starting with qualitative analysis, this is usually includes all of the lab parts that one person will do. So first, you'll be given powders, which are like crystals or powders, and you will have to identify what they are. There's a list of what they can give you, so they can't just give you some random chemical, and that list is on the event guide in the resource portal, so if you don't know those, you should go check them out. And for regionals, this is 6 to 8 powders, and for states, it's 8 to 10, but expected to be more on the high end, so you have to learn how to time manage. because you have to do multiple tests on all of these to identify what they are, so that's going to take time. Hair includes human hair, which can include identifying what race the person is from or parts of a hair, and also hair from animals. So this is another thing they changed this year. And this year you will have to be able to identify human hair, bat hair, horse hair, cow hair, and squirrel hair, which is different from last year. And fibers, you'll have to be able to identify different types of fibers, such as cotton, linen, polyester, and those kinds of things. You can do tests on all of these, and if they don't give you the actual hair or fiber, they'll usually give you test results that you can look at. And polymers includes different types of plastics like PS, PE, PETE, and those kinds of things. Okay, so those are all usually done by one person, the lab person. And so the other things are mostly knowledge questions or things that do not need actual experimentation, basically. So fingerprints is one thing, so this will either be asking you to identify who a certain fingerprint belongs to or different parts of a fingerprint, which you should be familiar with. And for this, advise you to bring a magnifying glass, since some of them are very bad quality. For glass, okay, another thing for many of these topics, you should understand that not all of these topics are on one test. They will pick and choose from these, but it will definitely have qualitative analysis and the big analysis at the end that we'll talk about. But for some of the other ones, they're very rare on actual forensics tests. So if for screening, for some reason, you start running out of time or short in time, some of these you may want to spend a little bit less time on, but if you make it on a team, you should definitely make up for that. So glass is one of those. Glass is a pretty rare question to get, and that will usually be on angle of reflection, angle of refraction, and breakage, and those kinds of things. Entomology is also very rare, and this is, as you can tell, insects. So when a person dies, different insects appear at different times after the time of death, which can help you get evidence for the crime scene. Blood is kind of a medium. It appears sometimes, sometimes not, and this can include doing finding the blood type using an actual experiment, or identifying what species the blood came from sometimes, or just general basic knowledge about blood types, antibodies, how that works. So yeah, and then chromatography is very common. I've seen it on every test, and it's the picture that you see in the bottom right hand corner. It's on a piece of paper with ink usually, and you just do a simple test. Takes a while, but most of the time it's just waiting so you can do other stuff, and they'll ask you to calculate the RF value, so you should know the equation for that. Mass spectrometry is the thing that most people have the most problems on. So it's the white graph that you see on this slide. So it is basically asking you to identify what something is given this data, and there are lots of websites out there to help you find it, and there's some notes on the Science Olympiad wiki site that aren't very helpful, but this one you should definitely consult a chemistry textbook or Google a lot to figure it out. It's not very common on forensics tests, but recently it's been coming up more, so you should study for it. And they won't give you something as hard as on this slide. It'll be something much simpler. I just use this as an example picture. DNA is another thing. They may ask you about PCR, polymers, chain reaction. They may give you a picture of a gel, and ask you who does this DNA belong to, and basic things like that. Seeds and pollen and tracks in soils and bullet citations are all extremely rare, and they're not very hard to study for. Tracks in soil, you just have to find the mirror image of a shoe print or something. Yeah, so I'm not going to go into very much detail on that. And the most important thing is the big analysis at the end. So after you've gathered all this evidence, they'll ask you to write an analysis on who you think committed the crime and all the evidence why, and also include the evidence why the other people aren't suspects. That's very important. And this will require you to use as much evidence as you can. So if you don't finish a previous part of the test, it'll be hard to do this. So you can see how time management becomes an issue in this event. And qualitative analysis is especially important for this last analysis, so you should try to get that as finished as possible. Okay, so for sample problems, every test format is different, and so there'll be information-based questions about different parts of a hair, different parts of fibers, how to find different types of fingerprints and that kind of stuff. And they'll be lab-based, which, for example, if you're given a powder, they'll ask you, what is this, what is its chemical formula, what is its common name, and like sometimes they'll ask you why. And okay, I'm just gonna go up to the content slide again to add some more stuff about qualitative analysis. So I'm just going to do an overview of what they give you to do the test so you can have an understanding of that. So they'll give you a Bunsen burner to do flame test, which is very helpful because some chemicals, such as sodium, have a very distinctive flame color, so that'll help you a lot. They'll give you hydrochloric acid and NaOH to run tests. They'll give you Benedict's, which helps for a few, but you should use it sparingly. Another thing I've noticed is that sometimes they won't give you they'll give you some compounds, but they won't give you the necessary things to run it. For example, they may give you Benedict's solution, but they won't give you the hot water bath to actually do the test. So that's basically pointless, and you can't do that test anymore. They'll also give you iodine to test for starches, which is very helpful. And basically you will need to run like a series of these tests in order to determine what something is. And a flowchart for this is especially helpful, so I would recommend that. Okay, so for sample problems, they're all very different, so there's not much you can do, but yeah. Okay, so for resources, there are lots of resources that you can use, but unfortunately for this event, there is no holy grail or one source answer to everything because there's so many different parts. So I would recommend the SciOly wiki site that has a lot of information, and that's where I first went when I first started this event to find out a general overview of everything. The official Science Olympiad website also has a lot of notes, but unfortunately, since we're only allowed 5 pages of notes this year, you can't just print out everything and stick everything in a binder. So you actually have to process all the information and choose what you can memorize and not include, and what is essential to include on the note sheets. So you'll have to Google resources for the individual topics. So you'll have to Google blood, you have to Google different qualitative analysis techniques and things like that. And chemistry is a pretty big deal in this. You don't need to know chemistry to do this event, but it would be very helpful if at least one person in partnership did. For example, when I started this event, I had not taken chemistry yet, but it's still fine as long, because they don't usually ask you, oh, balance this equation, or what is this reaction, but concepts of chemistry will definitely help, especially if you're doing the lab part or the qualitative analysis part. And personal experience is very important, especially for time management, because that's so important on this test. Working together to be able to finish both parts to the extent where you're able to gather all your evidence and write it into that giant analysis. And personal experience for qualitative analysis, if you're going to be doing the lab part, is very important, because they'll resources might tell you what something should look like, or describe what it will look like, but if you haven't done it for yourself, those descriptions might not be what you would use to describe it, so it might be misleading. So if possible, if you make it on a team, obviously because you don't need to do any lab for the screening, if you make it on a team, I would highly recommend you to try to find some time. I'll try to see if I can get some like lab sessions in to just like play around with the chemicals, see how they react, and that'll help you a lot. Okay. We have about 15 minutes right now, so I'll go see if there's any questions that you guys have that if you sent in the chat, and if not, I'll come back and I'll go a bit more in depth to all the resources, or not resources, content on this event. Okay. Okay, so I have checked, and there don't seem to be any questions so far yet, but if you guys think of any after this presentation, feel free to email me. My email should be somewhere in one of the Science Olympiad emails, and I will go through and talk a bit more about content, which you guys probably want to hear anyway. So, for content. Okay, so from personal experience, I have the most experience with the lab part because that is what I'm used to doing. So I'll try to give you a bit more information on that, and then I'll talk about more of the written sections as much as I can. So as I said, for powders, there's a certain list that they can give you, so they can't give you random stuff. And don't be intimidated if they give you like not thousands, but a lot. And for the resource that you can bring, the school the school and I will make sure that you get everything, because if you don't bring some things, you'll be at a big disadvantage to all the other teams. I remember my first invitational, we were very short on supplies, and the event did not go extremely smoothly, let's just say. Okay, so for hair, the easiest way of identifying it, if they give you a hair, will be to use a microscope, and you should search up what microscopic pictures of the hairs look like, and find out easy ways to identify them. So for example, bat hair looks like chocolate strawberries on a stick. Like literally they look like little strawberries all lined up in a row. And find connections like that to help you remember. For fibers, bone test is what I would recommend to do this, because different fibers burn at different rates. One especially good resource to find fiber and polymer tests is on YouTube. Actually, YouTube is very helpful for all of this. Like, just go to YouTube, search everything up, try to find it. But especially for fibers and polymers, there are a couple of very good videos out there by, I think, the North Carolina Science Olympiad, or something along those lines, where they show you different methods of identifying them, and it's very helpful. So for fibers, burn test, do not use the Bunsen burner. If they give you a candle, use that. If they really don't give you something, use the Bunsen burner, but I would try not to use that. So fibers, the synthetic ones, if you bring them close to the flame, they'll melt but not burn, so that's how you you won't know if it's synthetic or not, and you'll have to do more studying and practice to figure out how you can tell between linen and wool and cotton. So that's fun. Polymers, sometimes they'll give you the polymers, but the most common ways of identifying them are by density, because they'll all have a different density. And if you watch the North Carolina Science Olympiad video, it'll tell you a way to find out using different solutions what something is. You might have to pause in awkward moments to copy that in the chart, but it's very helpful. For fingerprints, definitely know the different parts of a fingerprint and how to identify them. So an easy way to identify would be to look for small sections, such as like bridges or ridge endings, that are similar between two prints, and if they're similar, then you'll know that it's the same fingerprint. And please know the difference between the radial and ulnar loops. That's very important. For glass, I'm not going to go too much into detail on that since that's not very common, and I won't go too much into entomology since that's not very common either. Blood typing is important. So if you test it with the solution that has antibodies A, and if it clots, that means it's blood type A. So basically, if it clots, it is that blood type. Blood type A has A antigens, B has B antigens, O has none, and AB has both. So that's how you know. And then there's the RH value, I believe, for determining if it's positive or negative. But that's basically blood testing. They may ask you certain questions about, as again, the antigens and antibodies that I just explained. They may also ask you to do certain calculations, such as from what height blood fell from. Hint, hint. This is all stuff I've seen on past tests. So yeah, chromatography, really the only thing they'll ask you to do is find the R value and maybe identify, like, they'll give you like 4 other like chromatography strips and be like, oh, which one is the same, or like which one has a similar R value. That's very simple. Okay. Mass spec, I want to see if you guys can figure it out on your own. But a good thing is to start is find the M to Z ratio, the M peak, and work your way out from there. DNA, there might be a couple basic questions on like like structure, like ACGT, that kinds of things. There aren't usually that many questions other than like identifying which two are the same, which is very simple. You just look for which 2 pictures are the same. Season pollen tracks and soil bullet citations I won't go into. Okay, analysis. This is not just like a 5-sentence thing. It's very long, so you should spend at least 5 to 10 minutes. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes of, I think, the 50 or 55 minutes that you get in competition to do this. To write your analysis, you have to include who did it, evidence, and you have, first of all, readability. If they can't read it, they're not going to read it, and they're not going to grade it, and they'll just give you no points. It's also important to include why the other people are not suspects, because that's a very important aspect of it. Like, why did you rule out the other people? And be sure to include like all the evidence that you have. If you have some weird piece of evidence that like doesn't fit in anywhere, that usually means A, you either did something wrong, or B, it points to someone in some way, you just haven't thought about it. Another thing for qualitative analysis, for powders, sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but for powders, they'll often ask you what a certain chemical is used for, because in the test, they'll give you a scenario, which is usually 1 to 2 pages, which you will have to read, which again takes away from your actual test taking time. But you'll have to read that, and then they'll give you descriptions of all the different suspects, and they'll often give you what they do or where they work, which will influence who committed the crime. based on what the powders are actually used for. So for example, if there's someone who works as a baker and one of your powders is sucrose, then you can say the sucrose indicates that maybe this guy was there because he works at a bakery and they use sugar. And that kind of thing. So, we have about 5 more minutes, so I'll check again to see if you guys have any questions and see if I can answer them. Also, I'm not sure if I'm checking the comment section properly. So, okay. So there's a couple questions. Someone asked, what is the format for the screening test? So, the screening test, what happens, okay, so since there's no lab, I did not do that, but that does not mean you don't have qualitative analysis. Instead, I wrote down the results for you, so you will have to interpret those and figure out what chemical we have, which I think helps a lot. I did not include all the topics on that giant list that I had because that is not representative of an actual test. I selected the ones I thought were the most important, which I hopefully you got through this video to place on there. So yeah, and there is an analysis, so you will have to watch out for that. But for the screening test, you will have 1 hour, I believe, instead of the 50 or 55 minutes. So you'll have a little bit more time. And someone else asked, how many types of chromatography do you need to know? Okay, so I know on, I think the official Science Olympia website, they give you multiple types of chromatography. So far in competition, I've only seen one kind, which is the kind with like ink or a pen. That doesn't mean they won't give you other types because different people make the tests every year, so different people choose to put different things on there. For example, last year at regionals, I believe, the tests were made by people from Stanford, which was very fun to do. But so far there's only been pen chromatography, but you might want to know a little bit about the other ones just in case. Do I know of any other resources? Okay. If you want to know, if you are planning to do a lab event and you want to learn more about qualitative analysis, I would definitely recommend a chemistry book, which I do not have on me right now, but I will find it and include it in an email soon, hopefully, that I think is very helpful for general chemistry. Honestly, other resources, again, as I said, YouTube is very helpful, but since there's so many different parts, you basically just have to Google a lot of stuff. Practice tests are also really helpful because they cover everything. You'll be able to like time manage, and you will be able to see like, oh hey, in this practice test they tested us on this thing and I didn't have notes on that before, so I should research that section. I've gotten a lot of notes that way. So I believe that's it. So I think our time is just about at an end. So hope you found this helpful, and if you have any other questions, feel free to email me and I'll answer them as soon as I can. But I think we are just about out of time for today. So thank you. Good luck on screening and interview.
Hello, testing. Testing, testing. Hello. So, this is the robot arm presentation. So, this event is basically you have to build a robot arm which picks up stacks of pennies, and there's 5 stacks of pennies laid around the board, and you have to flip them over and place them next to an archery target. And this archery target is about 40 centimeters wide, and the goal, like how to get the most points, is to place the most pennies in the center of the archery target. And to do this, you get 3 minutes to place 50 pennies in the center of the archery target, and the high score wins. So the most points wins. And also, if you get the pennies facing tails up, that's also double the points. So some parameters for this event: the robot arm has to fit in a 25 by 25 by I think 100 centimeter cube, um, which is about 1 foot by 1 foot. So and then yeah, like I said, closer to the center is more points. And how to flip the pennies over. So the pennies start heads up, and if you flip them so they're tails up and place them in the center of the archery target, you'll get double the points. Also, the max battery voltage is 14.4 volts. That's something to consider. Okay, so here is our robot arm video that me and Hari built. So this is basically our robot arm drawing a smiley face. And now Srijani is messaging me saying I'm on Emily's live stream. Okay, I'm going to start a new live stream. Just kidding.
There it is.